You're sitting in a movie theater. The lights go down. Some character you've known for maybe 40 minutes does something that hits you somewhere you weren't expecting. And before you can stop it, your eyes are wet. You blink. You look around. You hope nobody noticed. And somewhere in the back of your mind, a voice says, "Pull it together, it's just a movie." Here's what that voice doesn't know. What just happened in your body is one of the strangest and most uniquely human things you will ever do. Not breathing, not laughing, not falling in love. Crying. Specifically, crying because of an emotion, because something meant something to you, because you felt it. No other animal on the planet does this. Think about that for a second. Not as a fun fact, but as a real biological mystery. Elephants grieve. Dogs feel fear. Chimpanzees, our closest genetic relatives, show distress, frustration, joy. But not one of them produces emotional tears. They can cry in the physical sense. Eyes water from irritation, from pain, from debris. But the thing humans do, the full face crumpling, throat tightening, tears streaming down response to a feeling, that is ours alone. In the entire animal kingdom, across millions of species, we are the only ones doing this. Which raises a question that sounds simple and turns out to be anything but. Why? The obvious answer is that crying is just what happens when you feel something strongly. Your body overflows, your eyes leak. It's basically an accident of biology, a side effect of emotion rather than a feature. That answer is clean, intuitive, and almost certainly wrong, because evolution doesn't keep accidents around for hundreds of thousands of years. Biological systems that cost energy and compromise your vision in a world full of predators don't survive unless they're doing something useful. Something important enough to justify the liability. So what was crying actually doing for the humans who first started doing it? What was it saying? And who was it saying it to? And why did it work well enough to stick around and become the thing you're trying to hide in a dark theater right now? The answer takes you somewhere most people don't expect. Not into the psychology of sadness, not into the chemistry of stress, but into the social architecture of early human survival. Into what it actually meant to be seen falling apart by the people standing around you. Into why showing weakness, in the right context, at the right moment, might have been one of the most powerful things an ancient human could do. Here's where the science gets genuinely strange. Because researchers have been studying human tears for decades, and what they found doesn't fit neatly into any single explanation. There isn't one theory that wins. There are three, and they all point to something bigger than any of them alone. The first theory is the helplessness signal. Back before language, before words like "I'm hurt" or "I need help" existed, how did you communicate vulnerability to the people around you? You needed something visible, something that couldn't be faked easily, or at least something that looked like it couldn't. Tears fit that description almost perfectly. They appear on the face, which is the first thing anyone looks at. They distort your features in ways that are universally readable across every culture on Earth. Researchers have confirmed this. Show a crying face to someone who has never had contact with your civilization, and they understand what it means. The signal is hardwired into the human receiver before anyone teaches it. That's not a coincidence. That's design. The second theory goes deeper into the chemistry. In the 1980s, a biochemist named William Frey started analyzing what emotional tears are actually made of. And what he found was that they contain significantly higher concentrations of stress hormones than tears produced by physical irritation. His interpretation was that crying is literally your body flushing stress chemicals out through your eyes, a pressure release valve built into your face. That idea got complicated over time. Later research questioned whether the volumes involved were large enough to matter. But something else showed up in the data that nobody expected. Emotional tears contain a compound that, when detected by other humans, measurably reduces aggression. You are not just expressing something when you cry, you are chemically signaling the people around you to stand down. The third theory is about social bonding, and it might be the most important one. Studies consistently show that crying in front of another person, when that person responds with care, produces a spike in oxytocin in both individuals. The same neurochemical that drives maternal bonding, pair bonding, deep friendship. Shared vulnerability, it turns out, is one of the fastest routes to genuine human connection that biology has ever developed. Crying doesn't just communicate distress. Under the right conditions, it pulls people toward you and locks them in. What's remarkable is that these three theories don't contradict each other. They stack. Tears signal helplessness, chemically suppress aggression in the people witnessing them, and then trigger a bonding response that deepens trust. That is not an accident. That is a system. And it was running inside ancient humans long before anyone had a word for any of it. Now take all of that and put it back where it belongs. Not in a laboratory, not in a therapist's office, in a world without hospitals, without police, without any of the institutions modern humans rely on to survive. A world where your life depended, every single day, on the willingness of other people to show up for you. Early human groups were small, somewhere between 20 and 150 individuals, depending on the era and the environment. You knew everyone, everyone knew you. And in that world, your reputation inside the group was not a social nicety. It was a survival mechanism. If the people around you believed you were strong, reliable, worth protecting, you ate. You stayed warm. You made it through the winter. If they didn't, the consequences were not abstract. They were immediate, and they were final. This is the context in which emotional crying becomes something extraordinary. Because in that world, showing pain openly was a calculated risk of the highest order. You were exposing yourself. You were telling the group, "I am not okay right now. I cannot handle this alone." And in a world full of competing individuals, all fighting for resources and status, that kind of exposure could destroy you just as easily as it could save you. Which means the humans who cried and survived, the ones whose genes made it into us, were not crying randomly. They were crying in moments when the social calculation made sense, when the group was safe enough, when the relationship was solid enough, when the vulnerability would land as an invitation rather than a liability. Crying, in other words, required social intelligence to deploy correctly. And the fact that we still do it, the fact that you feel the impulse to cry more easily around people you trust, that you instinctively suppress it around strangers or rivals, that is not a cultural habit you learned. That is ancient wiring doing exactly what it was built to do. There's another layer here that almost never gets talked about. In a group without language complex enough to lie fluently, trust was the scarcest and most valuable resource in existence. You needed to know who was genuinely on your side and who was performing loyalty while waiting for a better offer. Emotional tears, because they're hard to produce on demand, because they involve a physical cascade that most people cannot fully control, functioned as a credibility signal. When someone cried in front of you, you believed them in a way that words alone could never quite achieve. The tears were the proof, and the person who witnessed them, who saw that unguarded moment, who held that vulnerability without using it against you. That relationship became something different afterward, tighter, more durable, built on something real. Crying wasn't weakness leaking out. It was the technology ancient humans used to build the kind of trust that kept groups together when everything outside was trying to pull them apart. So here you are, 50,000 years removed from the savannah, sitting in a climate-controlled room, probably on a couch, maybe with a phone in your hand. And somewhere in the last week, you either cried and felt vaguely embarrassed about it, or you felt something coming and shut it down before it could get there. Pressed it back, changed the subject in your own head, moved on. Both of those responses make complete sense in the world you actually live in. The modern world punishes visible vulnerability in ways that are specific and consistent. In professional settings, in certain friendships, in the particular performance of strength that men especially are handed from childhood as the correct way to exist, tears read as malfunction, as losing control, as something to apologize for afterward. But here's what you're actually doing when you suppress it. You are overriding a 300,000-year-old social signal with a 200-year-old cultural norm. You are telling your nervous system to stand down from one of the most sophisticated bonding mechanisms human biology ever developed because someone somewhere decided that composure was more respectable than honesty. That is not strength. That is a very recent idea, wearing the costume of strength. The ancient humans who cried in front of each other were not weak. They were doing something that required real courage, reading the room, trusting the relationship, making themselves legible to another person at the exact moment when legibility felt most dangerous. And the groups that could do that, the ones where individuals felt safe enough to be seen falling apart and skilled enough to hold each other when it happened, those groups were more cohesive, more resilient, more capable of surviving the things that came for all of them eventually. Crying was not a bug in the system. It was load-bearing infrastructure. None of that has changed in your body. The wiring is identical. The chemistry is the same. When you cry in front of someone who matters and they move toward you instead of away, the oxytocin spike is real. The trust deepens. The bond becomes something it wasn't before. Your ancient brain knows exactly what just happened. It files it under. This one is safe. This one stays. So the next time it comes, in the theater, in the car, in a conversation that suddenly goes somewhere you weren't prepared for, and you feel that familiar pressure behind your eyes, and that voice tells you to hold it together, just know what you're holding back. Not weakness, not embarrassment. 300,000 years of humans reaching toward each other in the dark, saying without words, I trust you enough to let you see this. That's not something to suppress. That's the whole point of having people around you at all.